Okay. Hi, Powers. How nice to see you after about
Yeah.
a decade.
Nice to see you too, Kim.
I'm Thanks for joining me. I was so happy when Sarah suggested we talk because as in the times that she came to teach within my communities in Washington, it was always so awesome to sit with you and be with you and listen to all of the work and practice that you were doing and are doing. And so when Sarah named in an email exchange this transformational work, change and transformation that you're doing,
Change, yeah, change and transition,
change and transition.
which
So
is transformational. Yeah,
yeah,
same thing. But the idea,
let me start that again, actually. So I'll just like cut that and say, so when Sarah named and talked about your work, change in transitions, right? Change in transitional work.
yeah, good enough. I'll explain it later. So,
Right. I thought, wow, that sounds like something that, first of all, listeners of this podcast would really want to dig into. And they would want to dig into that because all of us here in these conversations are on one level or another seekers, not just of the external world, like where is our place in it? What can we do to serve it? What kinds of, so many people on this podcast are either longtime mindfulness, wisdom, or yoga teachers, but practitioners, if not also teachers. But also this sort of exploration of the inner world, which is what really caught my attention in both your description on the Skillful Change website, which looks like where you're doing a lot of your work now, but also in Moffitt's work, who founded this Skillful Change website. So there's a lot there. I'm not quite sure where to start, but I think it would be really great to learn a little bit about your through line of practice and learning to now.
okay, maybe just to start with what change and transition is in terms of definitions of that for Moffitt's work and for me. It's the idea that, as you know, as a practitioner, in in Buddhism, there's something called the three characteristics, the three marks of existence, and change is one of those. And so the recognition that no matter what, everything is fleeting, everything is moving. It's a great dynamic. It's in flux. And so if the change that we're either promoting or the change that shows up, as change does, is to our liking, there's no problem. We're all uh, good with that. But so often, even as we try and promote a certain kind of change, that doesn't happen. So there's frustration there, or something just kind of smacks us in the face, something like a death, a loss of a relationship, a job, whatever it might be, a war. Um, Certainly, right now, as we're speaking, what's going on in Palestine and Israel is breaking a lot of hearts, including mine. So there's a change that is about to affect the entire world. Clearly, it's starting there, but literally how things are breaking out. The world's going to have to change to respond to what's going on there. And so, since change is inevitable, what do we do in the face of change, especially the kinds of changes that were thrust upon us that weren't of our design, that weren't welcome? And so, the idea is that things are always changing, but we're not always responsive to those changes. In fact, if the change again isn't to our liking, we're resistant. I don't want this. This shouldn't be here. There's aversion that immediately arises with an unwanted change. And so the idea of change and transition is change happens, transition doesn't. Transition really requires a change in attitude in order for the change to be skillful and of use, or to make use of it in a more positive way. Because if we're pushing it back and going, this shouldn't have happened, why did this happen to me? All the various things we do. Yeah, that's so that in a nutshell, that's what change and transition is. Change happens. How do we navigate the change?
Okay. That's so well put. And of course, it's so funny because in our work, and if I may, the words change and transition can often probably get thrown around the way like awesome does and football or something. I don't know, like
Mm,
long run. I don't know. It just these
mhm.
are words I think that get so I think even in my understanding of your work, I took a little bit of that word transition for granted. I was
Yes,
thinking, oh
we
yeah,
do.
yeah, transitions happen all the time. But in fact, I was, cognizing that incorrectly because I kind of skipped over the change part and kind of dumped the word change into the word transition. So I really appreciate your articulating that. And so there are kind of two ways I want to go with my questioning. Let me try this one because this is what I know about you and about Sarah. One of the things that I just profoundly admire about both of you is your dedication to the inner work and how much time you've both devoted to becoming quiet and still, to observe the inner world, to understand its, to be absorbed in its intelligence and to, comport that or export that,
Mhm.
outside of yourself into the reality around you. My experience of you both is that you always radiate it. The way you've raised your daughter demonstrates that. I mean, there's just so many ways that I think you are such, both of you, such um, just, just the high level of meditative and like stillness awareness. And I do mean all of those words the way I sort of presented them.
Mm.
So when you discovered this work for yourself now, how do you bring in your wisdom tradition work, including yoga and certainly all of this meditation, retreating that you've done? How do you apply it? How do you, when you work with people that aren't so skilled at this or haven't done it as long, how do you connect those dots?
That's kind of an enormous question. So let me see if um,
I don't
I can
ask them
chew on
small.
that.
I'm so I know. I'm sorry. It's just
Yes.
unfortunately the way I do it.
So I think also because of my longstanding training in Buddhism, where you're trained, once you're teaching, that you're seeing people one on one in a quasi therapeutic way, and you're really encouraged early on to just listen. So rather than offering advice, of course, that is what people are generally asking you for. But before you offer your advice, to really try and shed all aspects of this is how I think you should be, or this should be, and see if you can begin to rest there. So it's a kind of meeting people where they are, and this also dovetails with internal family systems work that Sarah and I both do, which is the idea that each of us has the wisdom that we need. It's in there somewhere. The processes of our own life, the things that we've encountered already, can conspire to have us know ourselves in a much deeper way than we might allow ourselves. And so, again, rather than just seeing a flaw or a problem or something to be fixed, to really begin to know that the wisdom needed is already buried inside there some way, and then to offer the right series of questions in order for the person to arrive at that for themselves. So that's a fine line to walk. But over time, we've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this for what, 40 years? So
Just a few.
just a few. So I've garnered my 10,000 hours in terms of being able as much as possible. Again, coming back to IFS, the idea with IFS is get out of the way. So there's an acronym that we've all heard, WAIT, why am I talking? Which is really important in the IFS model. that you're really just seeing what's going on over there and just waiting instead of trying to jump in and have your own sense of what agency is around helping, right? So that's an agenda. And see if you can, as much as possible, relax your agenda for how this should go and be curious.
Mm. Which is,
Curiosity becomes a really, go
yeah,
ahead.
which is you modeling that curiosity then. I'm so interested in this idea that of the difference between the block, the problem, the thing that I'm focusing on as, your student or patient that's, torturing me in my life or obstructing me or, disturbing me in one way or another. And the innate or internal source or sourcing that I have that you, without this agenda or shedding this agenda, are helping me see. Like, could you give me an example of how you, maybe not with one person, but just how you would get underneath that and talk to that thing that's inside the person that is it sourced from their genetic family tree or in this internal family system? Where is it? Where does it live? Where does this intelligence live really?
So in the internal family systems model, it's not entirely unlike the Buddhist model, which is there's an essence self, and that essence self is free. It's knowing, it's luminous, it's open, etc. And so in the IFS model, that essence self is called self with a big S. And what that self is analogous to, the thing I like to point towards that might be helpful with that is if you think of a benevolent king or queen, their benevolence arises from a deep sense of caring and love for the realm. And so if you kind of imagine that now the realm is coming to them for help. So let's say it's all the knights are coming to the round table, female knights as well. They're all coming from their various fiefdoms. They all have their worldviews or perspectives based on their myopic vision of the realm. And so the benevolent king or queen knows that, but they also keep in mind that there's an essence nature, a realm nature that has to be responded to in the particulars of what each person is bringing or each person's particular limitation in terms of their view. And so for working with someone, one of the first things I attempt to do is to get people to become familiar with what views are operating at any given time and what views are being brought to bear on whatever the issue is that they're bringing. And so that becomes what's called parts work, because in this language, the idea is that there's this essence self, and then there's these various sub-personalities called parts. And they all have their views. And their views are tenured, essentially. And their views come from our various conditionings. They're from our race, our nation, our gender, and so on. And so all of these parts are kind of replicating all of those things, including mom, dad, or whoever the primary caregivers were, brothers, sisters, teachers, all that is kind of in there around the round table, going back to that. And so to the extent that each of those fiefdoms are in some sort of dialogue and communication and understand each other, to that extent, there'll be a kind of integrity to the realm, civilization, as it were.
And it's up
And
to
so this,
it's up to the king or queen to kind of hold space for all of those perspectives equally or
not taking sides, not
uh-huh.
taking sides. And so you feel like there is a benevolent entity in charge. And once you feel that there is that kind of, well, okay, something is holding court here, something that is the ultimate judge, as it were, and neutral and loving, understands me, understands my limitations, addresses me with respect. Because there's, in terms of this internal family systems, there are parts of us we don't really respect, we don't really like. And so we exile those parts, is how it's called in the language. And the exiling doesn't really work. The parts get actually stronger internally if we don't face them and bring them to the table,
Right.
hear what they have to say. And then part of my work, going back to how this actually works, is to find out why one is afraid to listen to that part. And so that becomes a whole process in the session of getting the person to really listen to why the part feels the way it does, what happened to it. And very often we don't want to hear, as I said, those parts. And so we try and shut them down. You can't say that. You can't be here. You can't feel that. There's a kind of bullying and a shaming that goes on from part to part. And so to get some sense of being able to listen without all that noise going on begins to allow the parts to have some integrity within themselves and then become a little more aligned with the worldview, as it were, of the round table. So that's such fun work, Kim. Such powerful work. Because of course, as we're all human, as you're listening to various parts, I have parts. The parts are being triggered as I'm listening and working with the part of me that's triggered now around what's going on here and trying to relax that so I can be of service and not be right now too much in it. So that now I'm actually trying to steer it because of my own fears or trepidations and so on.
So again, it's funny, is this whole conversation going to be like bifurcating in my mind? Because there's two different questions. Again, I want to. So I'm thinking a little bit about the modern model of yoga, which most of us listening have some or a lot of orientation to. And I sort of reductively say modern model when I mean the contemplative practice of exploring movements of the body, movements of the breath, and what those things together feel like and how they rise up and out of you and have any significance in the rest of your life, in your personal relationships, and the way you relate to the world, in if you become a teacher, how you relate to students. And what it's really interesting listening to you talk about relaxing those parts of you that get triggered in a situation. I mean, how much you have to put yourself aside. It's low self, I guess, when you're teaching is what I'm thinking. So I guess the question I have is, I wonder, I don't know if people listening or if you have had this experience practicing in the physiological exploration of yoga things. But my experience.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if I think I know what you're asking me, I think the practice of yoga asana mingled with the practice of mindful attention is designed to put us in touch with all of those things that we try to rise above, as it were. So staying in the head center. And so I think yoga asana is just extraordinary, as is meditation, for allowing us the time and space to begin to explore through the breath with the various ways we try and escape the discomfort of being human. And the more we practice being able to stay where we intend to stay when it gets uncomfortable, the more we are indeed able to just be with it, embrace it, and watch it change, watch its periodicity, watch what happens in the body as a result of a certain thought that turns into a feeling, which suddenly, physiologically speaking, we're off now, we're gone, we're not here anymore, we're not present, we're not awake. And so all that stuff, to begin to watch how that works, to begin to break that down, to begin to know that you can break it down, to begin to know, maybe most importantly, that you can be with it, that you can tolerate it, Because the whole point of running away is there's some sense that I can't do it. This is too painful, or whatever it is that your story is about it. And so
So
getting us to
soon.
recognize, yes, how much capacity. So I like to say that this kind of work really builds
Right.
capacity to be with.
To be with a, just see if I can like put it into words as though you're not. But to be with, because I keep also, or I'm thinking about going to that, to what I was really taken by in your skillful transitions work, change and transitions work, the values, the sort of values that this system helps you discover. So the difference between your beliefs, like false and true about yourself, is that what you learn to stay with, that then helps you navigate, to use the word again, and establish these through lines to your real values, like of living? Is that a
All right. Well, so let me start by saying, just in terms of the worldview that I have, when I think of well-being, I think of well-being as being a manifestation of living your values,
mm,
of actually experiencing those values on a day-to-day basis. And so, to the extent that those values are working for you, you will feel happy, sad throughout the entire spectrum of human emotion. You will feel like you are in the place you need to be. You're standing in the center of your life as you value it. And whatever's arising is a result of what should be arising because you are living your values. And
I
so,
see.
getting people to understand what their values are, because very often what we're doing, especially as we're all conditioned, is there are values we might hold on to that are from our culture or our parents, our gender, all that stuff again, that that may not be of the most skillful value at this point in our lives, perhaps never were, but we've just unconsciously adopted them. And if we don't know they're there as an unconscious belief system, because that's how they manifest, they will be controlling the narrative. And so, in order for us to gain more of an embrace of the narrative, of our own narrative, we've had to know ourselves. And to know ourselves is to know what we think, what we believe, what feels of value to us. And just starting there starts us on the path of intending to live our values. And in that intention, the values do show up as living entities. And we'll see in the living of it is this still the right value? Is this right? So rather than kind of trying to preempt what the values should be, just know what your values are now. Imagine how you'd like to see those values implemented in your life. Go for it. Live that, and just see. Just at that point, that's the creative quality of being human, and the creative quality of change. Here it is. All right, this value was really valuable 20 years ago. It's not so valuable now. Okay, so how am I going to change that? Well, what do I need to bring to bear in order for that to shift as needed, given the new values that are coming online as a result of this new knowledge? Yeah, like that. So,
I mean, it's so interesting listening to you describe this, because you're really calling for courageous people, people with lots of courage, I think, because everything you're describing to me, well, maybe I'm just talking about, I don't know if I'm just talking about, sounds really scary. I mean, really kind of terrifying to face, these these ways of living that, let me back up a step and say, because I'm kind of layering what I'm saying. Maybe I feel like I'm sort of sitting underneath an umbrella of post COVID, and how much change occurred for everyone, regardless of, not regardless, occurred for everyone. And it seems to me that everyone is on some different path of being able to articulate and live out the conclusions is too strong a word, but the discoveries that so many of us made, both very good and very dark and terrible during that time, because it seems to me that COVID was an accelerant of the knowledge of so much suffering on the planet that we all knew was there on some level, especially, again, back to my first question, those of us who are these kind of inner discoverers, inner adventurers, looking at ourselves, because I guess my feeling is that there's this external thing, this virus, that sort of shows up and just alters the course of human history for real, it seems to me. I mean, maybe every day, maybe the whole idea in these existential paths is that every day is an opportunity to witness the change of human history. I guess you could maybe say that, but it seems to me that it's not difficult to talk about COVID as this profound earth shift. And I guess the thing I keep going back to is, how could we witness all of this change happening outside without understanding that it's also happening inside? Because as above, so below, as without, so within. I guess I see those connections everywhere all the time, and maybe don't understand how to distinguish between those. So I'm a little in the brambles of my question, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, no,
sort of, yeah, maybe you can
I
pick
think,
up and help me make
yeah, I
sense.
think I know. Yeah, there, I think there is something about on the beautiful end of the scientific revolution, the
Mm,
really needing to see cause and effect on a surface level in order to believe what's underneath.
mm,
And so, in some sense, that revolution has made us more um, skeptical of spirituality, of belief residing underneath manifest reality. And and so the pandemic really, well, first of all, I think it did what we've all been trying to do as practitioners, which is quiet things down enough, quiet the distractions down enough to see what's actually there. Because as we all so well know, the modern world just has enough wonderful distractions to keep yourself from diving down underneath what's actually going on beyond those distractions. And so if I think I've got the heart of your question, what did things like COVID do for the rest of us? Well, first of all, am I in there in terms of what you were asking?
yes, yes.
It gave the rest of the world who were thinking along more linear lines time to reflect again, maybe coming back to values. So what do I care about most? If there's this potential for the world to turn itself upside down like that, I never thought that was going to happen. So many of us didn't, or could happen,
You didn't
could
either,
happen again.
really? It surprised you
Not to that
too?
extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because we have a close friend who's an epidemiologist, and this was, I think, right around Christmas 2019. Was it
Y-
2020 where it really things that really took off?
Yeah, 2019 was when, I mean, it's COVID-19. It was there. It was in it
It
even in
was
December.
we were already in it, so maybe it was the year before then
Well, no, I mean,
because
I just mean COVID emerged in China in December 2019, but I don't know, I'm sure where you were, but in the United States, we weren't quite there until March of 2020.
we were in London, and this gentleman is epidemiologist there, and he sat us down, and we were talking about our plans for the next couple of years and whatnot. He's like, "You're not going anywhere," and I remember thinking, "Wow, I never thought of my friend as an alarmist." Both Sam and I walked away from that dinner like, "Wow, we're going to carry on." Okay, I mean, I understand why he might be having those feelings, his own fears, and and then of course the world turned out to operate in just the fashion he indicated. So uh, hopefully we don't need more examples like that for us to. So one of the things that Sarah and I do now, we were doing it before, but I think it's become more urgent since then. Every January 1, we ask ourselves, if we had a year to live, how would we live it? And we do a whole ritual around it. And it's a profound thing to do. I mean, obviously you can't do it the way it would really be done because you might drop everything, right? If you knew
Totally.
you actually only had a year to live.
Yeah,
But
right.
in the context of being able to do the thought experiment, it's really clarifying for, so what needs to go? What's most important? What are the values now? And how can we bring ourselves closer to being that, living in that, experiencing that mostly? And I think things like the pandemic really helped a
Yeah.
lot of people
Do something
get
like
get,
that, right?
get clear about that,
Yeah.
and which is
Yeah.
why so many of us, I think, are working at home now. It's like, what? No, I want to be home. I want to be more with family. I don't want to work so hard, that many hours in the car, or whatever that might be. So I see a lot of positive benefits as well as all the struggle and suffering that came out of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and in some ways, of course, it's not even as easy as to say, "Oh, there's so much suffering that came out of COVID." There's so much suffering as we went into COVID. I think that as we, it's just interesting to
exposed.
look, right? It it's interesting to look back at 2020 and the amount of energy that people had like packed in themselves that they, I mean, of course I had this like, again, along with the bifurcation, which is just makes me seem so facile really, but at the very beginning of the pandemic I was like, it's the return to the matriarchy. It's a familial like resurgence because, we're um able now to go back into the home in a more almost agrarian way. And I had just really a lot, and this is just in March, I was having these, thoughts that we finally were going to be able to just slow down the really unhealthy pace of the demands of late stage capitalism. And I don't know where we are with that at this moment because it's so funny living here in Denver. When we came here, it was 2021, and we visited a couple of times. This is like, the height of the pandemic, really, and things were so quiet. There's nobody on the streets. There was nobody driving around. Traffic was nothing. And we live kind of not quite near downtown, but not far away, kind of pretty close. And so every, and in Denver, maybe this way in Portugal too, most of the year you have your windows open. I mean, just I mean, right now we sleep with our windows open every night. So every night I go to bed and I listen to how the sounds are just every night increasing. Like, and every night is dramatic, but like on increments of time, every quarter, every month, whatever, just we're back to the pace, we're back to where I hear it anyway. And again, I'm projecting that. I understand that's me and my relationship to sound, but it's so interesting to have been so new to a place and be in this really kind of different brain space where there's not much about this street or that street or this person or that person or this relationship or that relationship or this school or anything that I take for granted. I'm just learning, all the time here after 20 years of living elsewhere. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure you understand because I know you all have been on the move a lot yourselves. It's just interesting to hear the speed and the sound come back. And I wonder what the job is as a practitioner in that space and like in this conversation, like what to tease out there.
So in the journey of change, there's certain beats to it, and one of the beats is how fear and uncertainty arises in that journey, and how we respond to it, and if we respond appropriately to whatever the particulars are of that for us, we will begin to accelerate into the transformation around the change. But as part of that cycle, as we get forced to transform, um, fear and uncertainty arises again. It may be more subtle at that second level, but it's there. And so what it tends to do cyclically is it tends to push us back towards the old ways of being and thinking and valuing and beliefs. And so we kind of go back and go, this wasn't so bad. And this is maybe what you're describing about the world. It's like we're going to go back to doing everything we were doing
I
before the
worry.
pandemic without.
Yeah.
And I think there's enough of us out there who really did get the message. There's enough who did. And there are enough distractions, enough very real and powerful and important distractions, which I wouldn't necessarily call just distractions, like the Ukraine
Yeah.
and like the Middle East,
Oh my God.
that are going to keep us, in present moment awareness around what needs to be attended to, like a pandemic.
Yeah.
So, we're going to see. I think both. It's both. People are going to go back because it's too painful to really embrace all that's going on, and so my distractions are my refuge, and wrap it
Temporary,
up.
right? They're not though.
Well, but the feeling is this is what I feel like now, and I need to antidote this feeling now. It's great to think about the future and to do what I need to do to make the future I'd like to see arise. But for right now, give me that ice cream
I would
or
say
whatever
now
it might
there's
be.
right, and now there's the scroll stop. The Instagram, is sort of that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, or whatever it is that
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah.
the attraction to staying busy, to staying away from the deeper aspects of being because they can bring us into alignment with what we don't want and what we don't like. And rather than work with that, it's just easier to start another Netflix film, right?
Good. Yeah, and then
And so,
these.
I'm not putting that down because
No, totally.
I have my own ways of doing that. I have my switch off moments where, okay, I'm not practicing now. Of course I am, but I'm having my glass of wine now, whatever that might be. I am not attempting to be as mindful as I might attempt to be or want to be in moments of deep practice. And I'm kind of holding that in the spectrum of being rather than making it lesser than. It's almost like a needed aspect that, we're intense for a moment and then we just kind of relax into being. And maybe that's a good thing to talk about here too, because it's something I've really been working a lot with people lately on, which is to remind them that there is something called beingness, which is not the result of causes and conditions. And if you don't know that there's a place like that, or a state of awareness, a state of being that is just being, that's causeless, you're going to continue to do all the things you think you know how to do to antidote all the ways you don't feel like you're in being. So the idea that being is a state that we can enter and relax in, just to know that, first of all, I mean, there's a little bit of feeling that just as I say it, right? And you see it on your face.
Oh, yeah.
That we can know that, and it is an awareness that doesn't need. It's an isness. All the various descriptions over the millennia around it. This is the suchness of being. And if we know that as the backdrop, we begin to really know that's the backdrop, then we can enter the foreground with all the machinations
Noise.
of that.
Yeah.
All the noise, and just be with the noise, knowing the backdrop's always waiting for us. That clear and open and compassionate, loving, infinite face of being is there waiting. And so to begin to point people towards how they can access that through the quiet
Mm.
is also a way of giving them a different kind of refuge than just achieving any number of things, including achieving enlightenment.
Exactly. I'm really glad you used the word quiet, because I've been thinking about bringing in a question or this inquiry around a book I'm reading now. Have you heard of the book? It's called A Book of Silence.
I've seen it. I haven't, yeah, haven't
Alex
read it.
gave it to me like years ago. He was like, I gave it to you before Madeline was born and she's 14, but I have some like drawing of hers of when she was really little, drawing herself being older. It's so cute. It's like my bookmark. I was like, no, I definitely, you gave it to me when she was who knows what age, but it's been probably 10 years. And I've obviously, through my questions, been interested in noise and silence. And so anyway, she is in the book at this moment that where I'm at, describing, the heart of Zen, or the Zen of Zen, which is, it's indescribable, difficult to, I mean, the whole point of it is that it is not something you can land on and stay within, because it continues to fold in
It's
on
not
it.
an attainment. It's not an
Right.
attainment. Yeah,
Exactly. Right. It's
yeah.
not an attainment. And so the book itself is really a memoir of her attempt. She's a contemporary of Bill Clinton. She studied with him, which is whatever some name she drops in the early book, but fine,
Mm-hmm.
and so in her 70s, I guess. And it's a memoir of her attempts once her son went away to school, where she, in the words are right there, I was free to then explore, whatever she wanted. And what she wanted to explore was silence. And so she, getting back to your question about, or question, sorry, the statement you were making about the scientific revolution, and scientific resolution is what I almost said. I don't think we resolved much. And so I kind of want to pin that, or pull some things out there and connect what you said and what I'm, learning from her. Her claim, excuse me, her claim is that forever, from the beginning of time, we have created mythologies and archetypes and stories around nature and the sun and the moon, just very simply, as being like evidentiaries of life and death, that the dark is death and the light is life. And so if you were, as you were, we were, these emerging humans, having no real sense of time, and knowing whether tomorrow was going to look like today, whether the sun was really going to, the cyclicality of the planet, whether or not the sun was really going to return and we weren't all going to die at night because the dark is death, is what drives us, like fundamentally from a deep source of our, primordial brain. The fear of death, the fear of the darkness, is the thing that's, sort of champing at our bits all the time. So she goes on to say that with the scientific resolution, we were able to enumerate these truths and align the explanation of why we're not going to die with numbers and research and the undergirding of what it is we do when we measure truth. And so she's saying that in this age, we've come so far over that bell curve of explaining to ourselves truth, that we've lost spirituality, we've lost belief, because really we're holding on to this science or scientific revolution, all that it brought, including the information age, as a means of distracting ourselves from the real fear that we're going to die, and what happens when the darkness does not turn back into light. And so it, in your description, in your work, in the Life Changes work, you talk a lot about the seasons and how we live in this way. I think I understood your description, where we're sort of divested from these cycles of nature and cycles of change. And so I just wanted to connect this recent learning I've had on exploring silence that my amazing husband gave me years ago, knowing that somehow I would arrive back at this book, and what you're teaching people, and how we can, through these various wisdom practices. This is the thing I love about this podcast, is it's not just about what yoga we can do. It's about what contemplative work we can do in this inner stillness to connect with joy, just enduring, abiding peace that we can then, I don't know, keep for ourselves, give to our families, like kiss the daughter goodbye, or, bring out into the larger world the way you and Sarah are doing.
Mm. The word that keeps coming back, of course, is love. Just like really coming back to our deep humanness, recognizing that we are, in the most exalted sense of the word, animals, and that we respond to the world as a living world like an animal. You're mentioning the seasons. I think I mentioned in the article that I wrote about the fact that the seasons have largely been taken out of our hands because of the modern scientific world. There's lights that can be on
Totally.
24/7 now, and so,
Right.
and in some places you can have warmth all year round, or whatever that might be, or you could at least see it. And so there's not a sense of what's required in what season. And so there's something about finding out what that is for you. What season of life are you in? Because it's different season when you don't have kids, when you do, different when you're 40, different when you're 60, and so on. And so what's required of you as this planet Earth animal, this beautiful human species? What's required of you to really know all of that for yourself directly? And so I think I was also saying that part of the scientific revolution that's not giving us all we need is it's giving us this sense of there's more information to be had. And yes, of course, there is. We will continue to grow and change, technologically speaking, scientifically speaking, medicine, and so on. And that's really great. But it doesn't necessarily point us, since it's inexorably pointing us towards all these great things that are going to happen scientifically going forward. It doesn't point us back towards all that's underneath that with our humanness. It actually, it seems to me at least, it's inspiring more thinking, inspiring more knowledge, and less beingness. And so to really
Right.
begin to try and bring that balance back. And that's what I thought, and you mentioned that too, that something like COVID could do. It could, and it did to a certain extent. We were in London at that time, and just looking out on, we were living on a major street, and looking out on that street, the sounds of birds that came back, the foxes running through streets that they do
Totally.
not run through now, and so
Totally.
on. So this
Yeah.
whole sense of nature coming back, and this sense of moving, which I always like to talk about when I teach retreat, how we don't, how we've been encouraged not to move at the speed of our body, because the speed of thinking and the speed of the mind is, beyond the speed of light. So we can be anywhere in an instant, and sometimes that being anywhere in an instant, overriding the needs of the body, it's moving too fast. As the body feels frustrated by that, it's almost as if the mind is subordinating, the thinking is subordinating the body to its speed, which is not a human speed. And so the quiet has the potential, if we know how to get there, know how to place ourselves in scenarios where we can engage quiet, that we can come back to the speed of being an animal, combined with this magnificent thing called intellect and creativity, which separates us. Yeah.
That's so
So
beautiful. It's so true. I hadn't, yeah, yes,
yeah,
yes. I
yeah,
totally,
yeah.
yeah, and that makes me think as we, conscious of your time and
Mm, mm, mm.
thinking about the algorithm, which will notice us if we're under an hour, right? And on that note, I will say that I don't, I mean, I'm, I've been obviously thinking a lot about AI lately. I quite enjoy talking to Chat GPT. I take my time with, I'm like,
Mhm,
dude,
mhm,
Chat GPT is so nice.
mhm,
Does such
mhm,
nice things
mhm,
to me when and so I mean really but it feels like such a relief that AI, the Chat GPT can just answer these questions I have so
mhm,
quickly with some accuracy, some inaccuracies, I've had some conversations with Chat GPT about yoga. Just sort of up bringing the database up to date because
mhm,
the
mhm,
sort of way to define modern yoga as I have experienced it on ChatGPT is not quite reflective of where some of us are. So it's been
mm,
very interesting to just
mm.
sort of observe the misalignments of description of modern yoga as just being about yoga asana. That's sort of one of the things that kind of pulled through on the threads, by the
Mm,
way.
mm,
So I think
mhm,
everyone listening
mhm.
needs to go to talk to ChatGPT and give a bunch of links of our work, just to say FYI, this
Uh-huh,
could go
uh-huh.
into the database of what you're going to offer in 2025 or whatever.
Because obviously it's a program, so yes, it's only
Right.
going to spit out what's been put in.
Exactly. And so that's what I mean about it being a relief because AI isn't, I don't think, maybe I sound like a total neophyte, but AI can't tell me what's happening inside of me. There's no way I'm going to have, I don't, maybe not no way, but I'm not,
Mm,
my brain is stretched to its limits as
mm,
I think at the
mm,
moment of, if I sit
mm,
in my own room and stare into the blackness of the morning every morning, I do. It's the only time I have as a working parent.
mm, mm, mm.
Um, there's no AI interact. There's nothing there. There's just the beingness, right?
Well, to round our conversation out, just
Yeah,
there's something about where AI is going to take us. It's going to relieve us of the burden of
yeah,
information seeking.
yes,
And I think in the good way, it's going to throw us back to, okay, now what now? So what is being human? What does that mean?
right.
What do I do with that?
And the bad, what do you think? Like, in other words,
Oh,
what's the,
the things that everyone is talking about now. So how out of control that AI could potentially get. I don't subscribe to that being our reality, but it
right?
but it's there. A lot smarter people who've been looking at this question a lot longer are really fearful of
Yeah,
where we could
worried.
take this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we, and that's the key word, is it not? Where we consent to take it.
where we well, I mean, the one thing, the bad thing, of course, will be what is truth. The fact that AI is going to be able to produce my voice, produce my likeness with my voice,
Right.
saying things I never said, placing
That's
me in
true.
places I've never been. So
Right.
things like that are going to be really tricky going forward. And
Hmm.
hopefully by the time we get to that point, there we will be some measures to
Hmm.
give us some indication of which thing is actually happening here.
Yeah.
Is
What's
that
that?
Ty really saying that? or
That's true.
yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, mindfulness awareness in the age of AI, actually. I mean, that kind of is speaking of back to the first question I made, like the through line makes me think about that. Well, and so to really truly land the plane, the thing that I loved hearing Sarah say, not just what she said, but how she said it, which is, oh no, we're totally IRL. We do these workshops, we do these things like in person. And I'd love to learn a little bit about, or have you just tell the audience, we'll have all the links in the show notes of, you're leading a retreat in Italy in a
Yeah, so
few
the retreat that we're
days.
leading in a few days, it's a week-long silent retreat. And what we've been doing on these retreats in Italy in particular is going through the classic Buddhist mind training, so-called the Lojong.
Hmm.
It's 7 points of mind training, and there's 59 slogans in it. You probably know something about it. And they're just really beautiful, pithy ways to conduct a life, to refer to keep you on track. to keep your mind where it should be, which is in alignment with the body, not in opposition to. So the silence, so there we are again, the theme of silence, being able to calm down enough to feel gathered as a fully realized animal. So
Yeah.
feeling your feet, feeling your breath, not just
Yeah.
feeling your thoughts and emotions. So we do retreats. We see people, as you heard from Sarah, one-on-one,
Yeah.
working in with various things from Buddhist to IFS, internal family systems, to this change and transition model.
Mm.
And that's our work. And it feels really rich, and we feel really blessed to have it.
Yeah, there's no question that we're all blessed to know you and to know about this work. And I've had a lot of feedback. People so happy to learn about your work and sort of just again rediscover it. The other thing that happened for this podcast and the work that I started doing way back in 20 whatever it was on Yoga Lineages, and just a discovery of what it is and why or whether it matters, and how to bring teachings like this, conversations like you and I have had, to newer or younger practitioners, or even those who have been out there for a minute but haven't um, been thinking about or experiencing practice the way you've described. So I really appreciate your time, and it's just so great to see you again.
Great to see
Thanks
you,
for
Kim.
being here.
Thanks for asking.